We're surrounded by inspiration, success stories, endless possibilities, and infinite outcomes. It's enough to make you want to jump in and chase your own dreams. Everyone says just start, but what does that actually mean? Just starting feels really daunting. That's where we come in. The National Angel Capital Organization and the Black Founders Network are partnering to bring you women experts in our community ready to inspire and educate aspiring entrepreneurs and investors. We're going to be uncovering the secrets to building capacity, tackling challenges, and achieving success. So let's get started so that we can turn your vision into a reality. Hi, my name is Faiza Balogan, and I'm the founder of A Question For, a digital safe space to support individuals with overcoming personal challenges, and the program coordinator at the Black Founders Network. I have the pleasure of speaking to today is Lauren Phillips. Hey.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining. I really appreciate it.
Of course.
So as I mentioned, today we're going to be talking a little bit about your expertise as an entrepreneur, a Black woman entrepreneur. So to get us started, could you tell me a bit about yourself?
Sure. So I'm the Chief Product Officer at BioBox Analytics, and we have a data intelligence platform specifically for biological research. And our focus is clients who are developing therapeutics or developing drugs. So before that, I was doing my graduate studies. I was at the University of Toronto, and I was focused on a project that was a mix of wet lab as well as computational biology. So huge scientist at heart, love technology, and I love the fact that what I'm doing right now just blends all of my passions together.
Interesting. That sounds so amazing and fulfilling. So I guess I'm curious, how did you, tell me a bit about how you managed to mix those two niches, product and your science background, effectively to create what is now your startup.
Yeah, well, if you told me in graduate school or even undergrad that I would be an entrepreneur, I would have told you that you're crazy. It wasn't what I thought I was going to do at all. I was kind of just following the path and following my curiosity. So while I was at the University of Toronto, I was working on this project, and the goal of the project was to identify therapeutic targets for this pediatric brain cancer. So to do that, I was working with these really complex data types. So if you've heard of someone getting their genome sequence or proteomic sequencing, all those really complex biological data types. And a few of my now co-founders, we were all working with those data types, and we were experiencing challenges, just analyzing, narrowing down tens of thousands of data points. So first we said, why don't we build something that would make our life easier as graduate students, as academic researchers? And from there, we started BioBox. So we were first servicing just academic researchers, and from there, we scaled to service therapeutic companies as well.
Wow, that sounds like a major opportunity you unlocked there by accident, I assume.
Serendipitous accident, yeah.
Yeah. How did you, so outside of experiencing it yourself, when you're building a product, fundamentally you want to ensure that the solution doesn't just work for you, but also works for others. Walk us through your approach to building for others or building for your ideal customer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always try to keep that in mind, that just because I worked with some of these data types doesn't mean I or the co-founders, we have the answers. It's supposed to be product market fit, not founder market fit, or whatever we want to build. So speaking to people is really important. And I break those down into 3 different areas of the product. So there's the first discovery process, and then the second process is while you're building, you can get feedback. And then the third process is, I call it legacy feedback. So it's a feature that you already have and you're trying to get feedback on from existing clients. So I can break those down a little bit more. So on the discovery side, maybe you don't exactly know what to build yet, you have a rough idea. I love paying people for their time. So for 1 hour, I would say, hey, can we get on a Zoom call? Can you walk me through what you need to do on a day-to-day basis? How does your job align with the business goals and objectives of the company that you're working with? Or if you're an academic scientist, your lab. And then walk me through what an average day is like for you. What do you actually have to do? What are your challenges? What do you love doing? What do you hate doing? What are you currently using? And then after you contact maybe 10 or 15 people, you start to notice patterns. So problems that a lot of people have and that's consistent, and then you can start building a solution. So I love getting as much feedback before the engineers spend their time actually building the product out. So I would build small prototypes where people can see what the feature or what the solution would look like on the application, and get it to those people who I spoke to when I did those discovery calls. And I say, hey, we spoke about this. From my understanding, these are the challenges that you're facing. If I were to give you this tool or this software application, would it help you achieve those goals? So they get a feel of it. They can sometimes test it out a little bit themselves and then tell me if this is valuable or not. And then from there, if it's a go, then the engineers would build it out. And we work in 2-week development cycles. So at the end of 2 weeks, there's always something that's deployed to our software application that I can show to those clients, and then we can get active feedback. Because sometimes I design the prototypes and it's all amazing and great, but then technical challenges come into play. So we have to make some changes or amendments, and then that might impact the product. So getting that rapid feedback while we're building it out is really helpful, especially if it's a huge feature. We don't want to wait months to get this feedback. And then finally, when it's on the application and we have our clients, I'm always sending out either user feedback interviews so I can get their honest feedback of features that we have ongoing on the application. And then we also track all of our metrics. So everything that someone's doing on the platform, I can see. So I can see where they're dropping off. I can see where they're having issues. So I use those metrics and do my own data analytics to see how I can improve that. And sometimes I'll just email someone and say, hey, I can see that you're having a little bit of trouble around this area of the platform. Can we hop on a call and can I watch you use the platform? So I can see exactly how they're using it and what they're doing, and see where the challenges and roadblocks are. Because sometimes you think someone's using the product in a very specific and intuitive way, but they have their own completely different way of going about doing it. So I combine all of those, the discovery feedback, the while we're building it, and then the legacy feedback of features that we have ongoing. And from there, it really helps me get and build, hopefully, what is the right thing.
Yeah, that sounds like a really comprehensive process and flow, and like obviously you've created a really amazing product as a result of that. But kind of going back to what you talked about with the discovery phase, right? Can you walk us through how your process or your unique approach to analyzing the information that you're getting after interviewing individuals? Like, tell us the hat that you put on to really be investigative or anything like that.
Yeah, I think the first thing that I think about is as BioBox, what's our business goal? So is it new clients? Is it retention? Are we looking at maybe having users churn? Maybe we want to increase usage. So that'll dictate the type of clients that I want to speak to. So if I'm trying to improve sales, improve revenue, I want to speak to the net new clients. If I'm trying to improve retention, then I'm more focused on our existing client base. So that's kind of the first area that I look at. And then after that, I try to make the interview as unbiased as possible, because it's so easy to go into these interviews, especially with new clients, and say, oh, I think I know what they want. And then you ask the questions a certain way and it reinforces what you think you know, but they're pretty much just answering it that way to be nice to you. It's like, do you drink water? Yes, of course I drink water, but it's like, is that my priority right now, or is that my immediate need? So I try to make sure the questions are as open-ended and unbiased as possible. And then from there, I pretty much develop what I call an evidence ranking system, almost similar to the way that biologists use our platform. And it's like, what's the criteria that I care about right now? Is it, again, from the business goals, is it revenue? Is it retention? Is it churn? Which user personas am I trying to prioritize right now? So we have a couple different types of scientists that use our platform. So who am I trying to appeal to right now? And then we also have the UI portion, so an interface where people can actually go onto the application and use it in an intuitive way. And then we also have the API, so for people who are more programmatically inclined. So I look at all of those different factors and what matters the most to the business right now, and then that helps me prioritize the feedback and the features that we should be moving forward with.
Amazing. Wow, like I love that. Could you tell me a little bit about how your approach to looking at these insights has changed since you started BioBox to now?
I would definitely say I was inherently biased when I started as an academic researcher. I was trying to build like I said, build the product that we wish we had in graduate school. But not all scientists think the same way. Not all scientists value the same features that we would have. So really being open-minded, and as a product person, I think the most important thing is to put your ego to the side and put the business goals and success to the forefront of however you're approaching the product. So really implementing that as I moved, because we've been at it for 5 years now. So it's been quite the journey, and I think all of our stakeholders kind of have that mindset of sometimes you're not always right. You have to let the data speak for itself, or you have to let the clients speak for themselves, and then move forward in that way.
Oh, no, thank you for elaborating and sharing that.
But it's like, I feel like there's still really important business milestones that I want us to achieve sometimes before I feel comfortable talking about my processes, because I feel like it's like you have to let the facts and the accomplishments speak for themselves. Not saying that we haven't accomplished anything, but there's still some like pretty big milestones that I think would make me feel more comfortable doing something like this. But I'm like, it is what it is.
No, like, I mean, fair, like it's like understandable, but like I think that like as you mentioned, it's part of the journey, you know? And like I feel like as much like I like videos as a marker of where you're at, or like as a thing of this is where you are in your journey, or like a timestamp with like your journey, because it's like it lets you see how you've evolved and how like your perspective has changed. Like videos or like conversations like these, like the funniest, I only say this just because I literally did a podcast interview on in January. Did not know why I was asked to do it, and because like I want to say similar to you, but we are like, you are way ahead of me, like, and girl, no. So like I felt really like, what am I gonna say? But then I was listening to the podcast literally in January, like just a couple days ago. I was like, whoa, like a lot has changed in ways that I didn't even notice. And that's just with like, not necessarily my approach to building, but like, I guess how I'm looking at the product now. So, but I can imagine for you, it's like a lot has changed, but maybe like you haven't necessarily seen it to the extent that you imagine it to have changed yet. But I don't know, like,
yeah,
you're doing
makes
the
sense.
thing. Yeah, you're doing the thing.
Thank you.
But yeah, no, thanks Lauren for like sharing like your process. But like going back to BioBox, could you tell us a little bit more about like what BioBox is and like what you and your team do?
Absolutely. So BioBox is a data intelligence platform specifically for people who are doing biological research, and our focus is anyone or companies who are developing therapeutics or drugs. And why that's important is because a lot of early stage companies who are developing drugs, their goal is to get this drug into clinical trials. So the process of getting something into clinical trials can be a 5 to 6 year process and a multi-million-dollar process. So first it starts off with, what am I actually going to target? So what gene, what protein, are there a group of cells that I care about? Can I narrow down thousands of data points to maybe a list of 50 or 10 things that I can start really looking at with a fine-tooth comb? And then from there, can I design a compound or some sort of therapeutic agent that's actually going to target the target? And so essentially what I prioritize. And then I have to ensure that it's safe and it has low off-target effects. So maybe I want to target one specific protein and I want to ensure that it's not targeting 10 other things that are in the area. I need to make sure that the dosage is going to be appropriate, that it's going to be safe for humans if I move into clinical trials. So all of those decisions are data driven. And the data that they're working with is really complex, sometimes tens of thousands of data points, terabytes of data. So all of that complex sequencing data that I was talking about in reference to my graduate studies, so things like transcriptomics, proteomics, they're looking at all of this data that they've generated internally, as well as what's available publicly, to make these decisions to determine what they should submit for what's called IND to qualify them for clinical trials. So after spending millions of dollars, 5 to 6 years, you can get all the way to that point and realize I targeted the wrong thing. My compound doesn't actually work. So there's so many data-driven decisions that they have to make during that process, and it's really a time-consuming and lengthy process. So we provide them with a platform or software where they can stream in all of this complex data, and using underlying technology called the knowledge graph, they can understand all of these complex biological relationships to help de-risk some of the decisions that are associated with moving into clinical trials. And then on top of that, they can build custom evidence ranking and prioritization systems. So out of tens of thousands of data points, how do they know what's the most relevant and what they should actually focus on? And each company has their own scientific approach. So for some companies, they might care about cell lines and re-engineering cell lines and re-injecting them into a patient who has a disease. Other companies might care about modifying a specific mutation that's found in a disease population. So they have different scientific approaches, and our platform allows them to customize a system to prioritize and rank what evidence is relevant for them to make those really important decisions, so they have confidence moving into their clinical trials, and they can reduce the risk of the clinical trial failing, because that potentially puts the entire business at jeopardy.
Wow.
So when we say data intelligence, it's really transforming data into knowledge. And we never tell people this is what you should target or this is how you should do your drug discovery program. We're simply providing them with the tools so they can make those decisions with confidence.
Wow, no. Sounds like a very, really comprehensive and really complex work that you're doing, right? And I can imagine that you have a whole bunch of different stakeholders with different needs for a tool like this. And could you walk us through the specific people that you have targeted for using your product and how you prioritize their needs, possibly conflicting needs if be?
So in terms of prioritizing, we really narrowed down our ICP, so the customers that we care about, because if we try to service the entire market, like you said, there are going to be so many diverging needs, so many different features that we could go about doing things. So we first decided what's our specific customer profile that we care about, and who are the people within that organization that we should be speaking to. So for us specifically, we found that computational biologists, the people that are a little bit more computationally savvy, they're the ones that are generating a lot of this data that's going to be streamed into the platform. We need their buy-in first. So we get their buy-in, and then they're more willing to disseminate it to the rest of the organization and the other people that might prefer the pretty interface and the UI and all of those other features that go alongside that. So first, understanding the needs of the core ICP, so our computational biologists in the companies that we care about, and then running those discovery interviews, understanding what do these people actually care about, what problems are they facing right now, and how does it relate to the overall business goals and objectives, and where are their current issues with the solutions that they're using right now. And then I go back to what are the BioBox business goals and objectives, and I see where there's convergence, and I can say, okay, we really care about retention right now. How can we get these computational biologists to stay on the platform longer and to do more things? Okay, we can do that by understanding what their specific problems are and where the gaps in our solution are. So it's always looking at what are the business goals of our clients, what are the business goals of BioBox, then moving down to the users that we care about the most, what problems are they facing, and how can we best solve those on our platform.
Interesting. So I guess in that case, from what you've said, I'm curious about how, if there's ever been a point where there have been conflicting business goals with what the user requires or needs, right? How have you navigated those circumstances?
Yeah, unfortunately, sometimes it means telling people no. And I unfortunately have to be usually the bad guy that tells a client hey, unfortunately, we're not working on this right now. But I always try to see if there's anything else on the platform that could potentially be of use to them. Or sometimes the client might ask for something, they might ask you for a specific feature, but in reality, you can repurpose the features that you have on the platform to kind of address that need or address that goal, and you don't have to completely redesign a new feature from scratch. So sometimes that's a happy medium, but the reality is you have to say no a lot of times. So that is just an inherent part of building a product, but making sure that the customers that you care about, they're satisfied, and their most painful and most annoying pain points are where you're going for.
Absolutely, you want to give them a painkiller as opposed to a vitamin.
Yeah.
As we all know, or product people call it. Okay, so understanding that you work with scientists within a very specific field, could you tell us about some of the challenges that you've experienced or seen with building products or features that really meet the complex needs of scientists? The ones that directly use your platform, the people that might not be directly affected by it. Could you walk us through that?
Yeah, I would say one of the biggest challenges, especially in terms of UI UX, is the fact that these people are working with so much data, like terabytes of data and tens of thousands of data points, and this is a web-based application. So sometimes I come up with these really nice designs, and then I speak to engineering and it's like, we can't load all of that in the browser. So I have to approach the design with an engineering mindset and be conscious of what is realistic in terms of the UI UX. So that's one hurdle. But these people, they are looking for specific answers, and just bringing those data points to the forefront of the application in an elegant way. That's also something that I'm always keeping in mind when I'm designing features, and that can also be a little bit challenging, but it's definitely gotten easier as we've built over the past couple of years. We've gotten, I would say, a little bit creative in terms of what and how much and how many things we can load, but balancing traditional UI UX with all of the data that we're working with has definitely been a challenge.
Yeah, I guess with what you've explained, like it sounds like there's a lot of collaboration with like the engineers that you're working with. Like, what does that negotiation or discussion usually look like?
The debate. We work together really well, honestly, and my role as product is to bring them as much data as possible, speak to all the people that I can, speak to our clients, do the discovery interviews, do market research, use my own experience working with the data, and come up with what the solutions are and why these are important problems that we need to solve. And I bring all of that information to engineering, and then they would discuss the implementation. How is the backend going to work? Do we need to change anything with the UI UX that I proposed? Are there any other data challenges and considerations that we need to work with? Because our engineers, they're also computational biologists, so they understand how to work with this data, and that helps a lot. And then we also work really closely with our clients. So when we take on a new client, the first couple of weeks, we get on weekly calls with them. We run through the platform with them. We watch them use the platform. We get feedback. The engineers also either listen to this call or they're on the call themselves, so they get really insightful feedback and understand why I'm proposing some of the things that I am. But there have been times where myself or someone else on the team would propose an idea and we don't have all stakeholder buy-in. And at that point, we usually don't move forward with that feature. And that's something that happened pretty recently, until we got on a call and I actually showed the client, like, hey, this is a feature that we're thinking about using or developing, this is the problem that it's going to solve, and they said this would be really useful, and because of that we ended up moving forward with it. So making sure everyone's aligned and they all understand why we're building what we're building and what problem it's going to solve helps us work together really, really well.
Oh, it's really good. Like, I can imagine that definitely really helps drive things a little bit faster and, like, I guess cohesively. Would you say that it's pretty significant that, like, everyone on the team has to have some sort of, like, knowledge or expertise within the line of work, or do you think it's possible for someone without the background in, like, science and whatnot to build a product like yours?
I think it's possible, but I think it'll be really challenging. I honestly couldn't imagine doing my current role if I didn't understand the biology and understand the data. I think it's possible, and I think there are teams that are a lot larger than ours, and they have a mix of people who do have the bio background and some people who maybe just have an engineering or the product background and it works for them. Because we're a small team, it really helps for all of us to really understand the biology and the problems that are being solved, especially because our solution is really customizable. So that's one of our differentiating factors. Because everyone has a different scientific approach, we figured a one-size-fits-all solution wouldn't work. So we built our platform to be really flexible. So within 3 to 4 weeks, someone can come in and fully customize the system to suit their scientific approach to drug development and drug discovery. And for that customization to happen, you need people who understand the biology and how to work with these types of data points. So for me, it's really helpful. And then also having the scientific approach and mindset to product. So I think of everything as a scientific experiment. So it's like, what's my hypothesis here? How do I think the data is going to unfold? What is the sign of a good test? What's the sign of a bad test? And then I collect that data by either launching the feature or getting feedback from interviews, and I see how does that align with my hypothesis. So having that scientific mindset really helps me with the product development as well. But I think it would be really challenging had I not had the bio background.
Understandable. But speaking of tests and experiments and whatnot, could you walk us through yours and you and your team's approach to user testing for a product like yours? It sounds like you need it to be very customizable. You need it to cater to, like, the really complex needs of each of your users. Walk us through how you've tested in the past and how that's changed as well.
Yeah, from an engineering standpoint, as they're building out the features, they're writing tests. So if you introduce a new feature and when you introduce a new feature, you need to run all of the existing tests. And if it breaks one of the existing tests, that's like kind of like the first pass of, okay, there's an issue here. After that, there's human testing. So we go on the platform, we actually use it ourselves, try to catch as many bugs as we possibly can. And then usually if it's a major feature, we would launch it with a small cohort of our clients and say like, hey, this new feature is coming out. And before it even gets to the point of fully being launched, I would usually do a small incubation period with some of our clients where for a month or a couple of weeks, I get on these weekly calls with them and I show them improvements in the feature. So it's like, hey, we have A, B, and C coming out today. We have D, E, F coming out next week, and you can test the features in small increments so we can quickly get that feedback. And then when it launches, we have bug reports and the standard testing that you would do with software to try and minimize that.
Mm-hmm. When you say standard things with like software, like what could you like delve a little bit deeper into that?
Yeah, so people can report bugs. Mm-hmm. So if something comes up, they would typically just file a bug report, and then that would go usually to me. Mm-hmm. And I would have to investigate, is this a real bug? Sometimes we have these like, you can have like a transient bug where something would come up once and then it can't be reproduced again. But I would usually go in, verify that this actually happened. Then I create documentation for the engineers of how to reproduce this. I go through what's called the console logs to understand like what's actually going on, break that down so the engineers can try and tackle that issue as quickly as possible. I want to remove like all barriers. I don't want them to have to go in and do in-depth investigation. So mm-hmm. I break down the issue as well as I can, send it to engineering, and then based on the severity of the bug, so if something is really critical, it's addressed right away. So drop mm-hmm. anything that you're doing and address that bug. If it's something small, maybe it's a UI UX thing, they would get to it at the end of our development cycle. So we work within 2-week development cycles.
Okay. Okay, so obviously this sounds like a really comprehensive process, and like you have to communicate and interact with like the rest of your team, other stakeholders, your users, and so on. Could you tell us a little bit about the tools that you use to support your process with effectively communicating, tracking what you're doing, and so on?
Yeah, so we do use quite a few tools. I think it's an ongoing joke in software how you're just like moving data from different software mm-hmm. pieces, and yeah, anyways. So in terms of like the software tracking the engineering work that's being done, we use a software called Jira. Mm-hmm. So probably a lot of people are familiar with that. Essentially, I go in there's something called the backlog. So it's where we track all the work that we want to do. And I would go in there, write a description of what needs to be done, all of the requirements, all of the analytical trackers that we want to put into the application. If there's any UI, UX, I do the wireframes, put those into the tickets. The engineers would come in, fill out any information about the technical implementation, and we work in those 2-week development cycles. So every 2 weeks, there's a list of tickets that need to get done, and then they're moved on to the production software. In terms of all of that planning, we do that on Notion, so that's where we plan and I would write out what all the user problems are, how we're solving them, any other information, all of our discovery interviews, all of that stuff is tracked on Notion. And then in terms of communication, we're mainly on Slack. So I'd say those are our main two. We have a couple other ones less important, but pretty much documentation on Notion and then engineering deliverables on Jira.
And then with regards to testing specifically, are there specific tools that you use?
Yeah, so in terms of tracking the user metrics, we use Mixpanel. Okay. So Mixpanel allows us to track all of the events. I can see all of the user flows. So when someone logs onto the application, what are they doing? How long are they spending on the application? It allows me to measure things like retention. So what's our 30-day retention? So how long is someone on the application, or how many times do they return within a 30-day period? All of those types of user analytical tracking we do on Mixpanel. Mm-hmm. And then in terms of testing, the engineers, they have their own software that they use to take care of that.
Mm. Okay. So thank you for walking us through that. So I don't want us to wrap up just yet. I have a couple rapid fire questions I want to pass on to you. So I guess, so you've talked about interviewing individuals to gather feedback and insights. Do you have any unorthodox methods that you found helps with gathering insights or information about your user needs?
I wouldn't say it's unorthodox, but as I mentioned, just pay people for their time, especially if you're trying to sell to B2B. these people typically make a lot of money. And obviously you won't be able to match their salary, but at least be courteous and compensate them for their time. Usually they're more than happy to get on a call with you, sometimes for free, but if you do offer that, you'll probably get a better response rate.
For individuals or startup founders that are just getting started who do lack the resources to pay people for their time, like what other approaches could they take to compensate them, or I guess show appreciation for their participation?
Yeah, I would say, especially if you're reaching out to someone who's in B2B, they probably get hundreds of these messages every day. First, you're going to get a lot of rejection. Don't take that personally. Not everyone's going to say yes, but to improve the odds of someone saying yes, be really kind and courteous. Do your due diligence and look through their profile, maybe look at their Twitter, look at if they've published anything recently, and ask them about that and how things are going in regards to that, to show that you've actually done some due diligence about who they are and what they'd be looking for. And then also demonstrate that you're willing to contribute value. Like you want to learn this information because you're looking to create a solution that would solve for XYZ. And if it's a problem that they actually have, they're usually more than happy to speak to you so that you can get the information that you need to build that solution.
Got you. So it sounds like you're framing those interactions as you're putting your personal needs or business needs aside and really prioritizing what issues or problems they have, correct?
Yeah, don't just go in there like, hey, I need to speak to you, because they're going to say no most likely.
Yeah.
So again, be really kind, be courteous, do your due diligence about that person, and then offer value in some sort of way.
Are there any other tactics that you've employed that helped you with trying to interact or meet with your target audience? Or
I would say just message as many people as you can. And if you're getting started, this is going to sound crazy, 100 people a day. And that's going to take long, especially if you're doing an email or LinkedIn. It's like message 100 people a day. That might take you 4 hours, and then your workday starts. That's kind of the nature of small businesses.
No, for sure. Like you have to put in the work early on to see just a fraction of results, right?
Yeah.
Could you tell us some red flags that tell you that your product isn't necessarily meeting user needs?
If people aren't using it, so that's the number one. Look at your retention metrics. So especially depending on the type of product that you're building, that might change. Think about what are the user behaviors of the people you're designing for. Are you designing it for someone who's going to use this weekly? Do you think your users are going to use it monthly? Look at how those retention metrics play out, because if maybe you're expecting weekly usage, but in reality people are going to be monthly users. Is that okay? Does that impact however your revenue is going? Are you charging them on a weekly basis or a monthly basis, or whatever your kind of business structure is? So I would say that's the biggest sign. And then 2, when you speak to people, ask them, is it actually solving a problem for you? Usually they'll be honest, because if they're paying for the software, they're not going to pay for something that isn't really solving a problem for them. So I'd say those are the 2 biggest red flags. And then also, if you can't reproduce your sale, so especially if you're in software, and let's say you have one really big sale and then you can never find another client again, that's a huge red flag, because maybe you found a needle in a haystack, but it's not actually a market that you can scale and actively service. So making sure you have a deal cycle that's repeatable and recyclable, so that when you do hire a salesperson, you can say, hey, this is the blueprint, this is my target persona, so if they go out and they're trying to sell for a month, they should at least be able to close one deal.
Interesting. I guess like speaking to like the red flag of not necessarily being able to duplicate or replicate a sale, like how do you distinguish between the fact that the thing that you've created isn't necessarily, let's rephrase that. How can you distinguish between an opportunity versus things are not going as planned? Like you need to change things, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I would say set some deadlines for yourself. So again, kind of like hypothesis testing. Let's say you think that the solution is going to work. Give yourself maybe a couple of weeks or a month or however long, like set a timeline for yourself. Don't let it go infinitely, because it's really easy to fall into the trap of, oh, I'm testing this thing, but when does the test end? So at least have some sort of checkpoint, or like, okay, hey, we've been doing this for the past 6 weeks. Let's evaluate the data that we have. What's the data telling us? Is the data telling us anything different? And at that point, you can start reevaluating. But I think the most important thing is to just speak to people, because you can look at all of the data, but then you're missing the qualitative information as well. Because maybe there's some small barrier that's stopping people from using your product. Maybe it's a really easy UI, UX issue. Maybe the person is just really swamped right now. Sorry. Maybe the person is just really swamped right now and they can't get to using your product, and it's not about your solution. So speak to people, try to get as much data as possible, and set timelines where you're going to check in and reevaluate if what you're doing is actually working.
Okay. Okay, so thank you so much, Lauren, for like your insights today. And before we wrap up, is there anything that you'd like to share with any aspiring or entrepreneurs are kind of going through this process right now?
Yeah, I would say the first thing is fail as quickly as possible. So as you mentioned, you're wondering, is this working, or am I doing the right thing? You need to get to those answers as quickly as possible. Don't drag things out. So negative data is often good data, because then from there you can pivot and figure out why things didn't work, and what you should be doing next.
Before we change that, let's highlight that. You said negative data is good data. Like, can we put that on the screen, please? I think that was amazing, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and that was something really hard for me to digest as a scientist, because in academia, it's like everyone wants positive results. You know, you want to show everyone that you just cured cancer. Yeah. Obviously not realistic, but there's this, everyone wants things to go well, and sometimes teams or entrepreneurs can get upset when it's like, I just spent the past year doing something and it turns out we were doing the wrong thing. So the sooner you can get to that answer and say, okay, that was the wrong thing to do, what are we going to do next? And it's not to point fingers, it's not to say I told you so, or you were right, I was right. It's just, how can we get the needs of the business on track and reposition ourselves in a way that'll help us succeed? So I would say that's one thing. And then the second thing is, I kept asking myself, is it supposed to be this hard? When are things going to get easy? But when you're in entrepreneurship, it doesn't. It's the reality of running a business, and things are going to get challenging, but at the same time, you're going to get better. And you just have to keep pushing through those adversities, no matter how difficult they can be, because you go on LinkedIn, you go on social media, and it seems like everyone's business is thriving and everyone's doing so well, but behind closed doors, everyone has their own challenges. So don't feel like you're the only person going through those adversities.
No, very well said, Lauren. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your insight, your time, and just overall presence here today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. Yeah.